Evening all on PlayChat and streaming to YouTube. Okay. This week we're going to have a look at David Howell at the Dubai Chess Open. He's done amazingly well, nearly a 2700 plus rating performance, and so I thought it would be nice to have a look at his games. The Dubai Chess Open was affected by a cheating scandal. You may be aware it hit the news actually here. I'm not going to look at that at all. There was a grandmaster that apparently cheated with a cell phone in the toilet, mobile phone in the toilet. But otherwise, yeah, the Dubai tournament is a fantastic FIDE event, fiercely contested, gigantic prize funds, lots and lots of grandmasters playing in it. And David Howell, as far as I could see, was the only top British player there. But nevertheless, he has done fantastically well in this tournament. Let's have a look at a few of his games. So, in round one, he was playing a 2-2-5-5 with black. So, Khayala, Abdulla, 2-2-5-5, and so David was black. So after e4 we see a solid reply, e5. Let's put on a Kibitzer just in case for technical analysis. So knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, Ruy Lopez, a6, bishop a4. So pretty solid open from black, pretty standard stuff. White plays quite a trendy move now, which is to avoid the more theoretically trodden paths here, like rook e1 and bishop takes c6. White plays the quiet looking d3. It's quite popular though, d3. We have b5, bishop drops back, black castles. And I think there's this move casting. Also there's d6. That's quite popular as well on bishop b7. But casting has been seen over 400 times. I'm questioning that because now white plays bishop d5, which looks to be a real nuisance move, just introducing the pin immediately for knight takes e5, for example. Well, actually bishop takes and then knight takes, because you don't want the bishop trapped. So what does black do here? In the case of a routine move like bishop b7, then I'm pretty sure we can use this with white. Maybe knight takes e5 is not working, knight takes d5, but we can play bishop takes here and then takes. So yeah, black plays in this position a necessary move to protect d5. He plays bishop d6, so it looks a little bit awkward, maybe bishop d6, but it does the job. Bishop g5. So there's two pins now, and I thought this is quite interesting. How does black actually get out of this? He's used up his bishop there. He can't go back there. So what does he do about this pin? Well, he just kicks the bishop, and after bishop h4 he dares actually play g5, and I'm not sure this sacrifice on g5 is sound here. It's not brought up by the engine as an issue. White just retreated the bishop here. Okay, so bishop g3. And black played now knight takes d5, he takes knight e7, striking at this. Bishop takes, some simplification. And yeah, white might be slightly better here technically, but it's playable for black. c6. We have the move c4. I'm not sure about c4, this might be slightly inaccurate, might not be the best. c4. There was some other ideas here, maybe just a4 for example, but c4 we have knight f4, knight c3, and now this knight on e5 is kicked to here, and now a clever move in this position, kicking the knight again, f5, not worrying about knight takes h6 check. So I think black's doing very well now after this. If knight takes, yeah, I think this is trapped. It's getting trapped. King g7, and that's a bit dangerous. If G3 check, and then we can take here. So yeah, white is going backwards after F5 or forwards. Knight E5 was played. Queen F6. Rook A-E1 protecting the knight. Knight E6. And actually, okay, so black's major difficulties have been resolved. White plays Queen E3. And now we have Rook B8. Queen G3. So what is white up to? Well, here he's looking at the rook actually. White is actually threatening knight takes C6, among other things, and knight G4, just looking at this rook. So that's a tactical target here. So another maybe odd looking move you might consider, right, it's necessary, rook B7, just get rook out of that firing line. Queen E3. And now this bishop doesn't look particularly happy. White might be positionally playing C5 just to clamp down on this structure and leave this bishop imprisoned. So against this, perhaps black's next move is trying to liberate his position a bit. B takes, D takes, and he takes that B2 pawn. He dares take that B2 pawn. We have Rook D1. And white does seem to have a lot of pressure here. Queen G7, protecting this point in particular. Rook Fe1. Rook E8. So yeah, black seems to be okay despite this problem piece on C8. And in fact, if black gets another move, he would want to pin this knight here. That'd be nice. We see Queen D3. Knight F4 anyway. Here, Knight F4 looks good. Queen D6. Yes, this bishop looks really silly, but it's not the end of the world here because there's other stuff going on in the position. Rook C2 was played, and yeah, this is actually very, very tricky. Rook C2 is like the strongest move in the position, and yeah, there's something up with white's position here. Now, if the knight just moves somewhere, then knight E2 check, and look at this knight on E5, it's looking a bit silly. White would have to sacrifice the exchange. If he moves here, we can take this one. And it doesn't matter about the dead bishop. We've just won a piece. So, yeah, this is a bit of a problem, Rook C2. How does white respond to this? So, playing like a bishop down, but black's pieces, all of these guys, these are having a good time in this position. Okay, so what happens here? We have knight F3, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes C3, winning a piece there, and offering this bishop. It wasn't doing much anyway. Check, king H7. Now, actually, this bishop can't really be taken because there'll be a back row issue. That'll be a back row mate in 3. So white just keeps the rook here. It's quite dangerous looking. He plays H4, giving the king H2, and threatening now also rook E7 to actually win the queen. So temporarily black's a piece up here, but has to react quickly to, for example, rook E7, and he attacks now the white queen, queen C7, and again attacking the white queen, offering that C8 bishop. But after this is taken, black's pieces stand very well here, and we see the move G4. So even though it's back on equal material, the quality is very good for the black pieces. The knight is going back now, and we have this very nasty pin, rook D1. It's looking pretty bad, this position. If the king stepped in with king F1 here, rook d2, for example, with the idea queen d4 next is quite strong. White desperately sacked the exchange in this position with rook takes e6, protecting for a moment there e1. That was taken. Queen takes e6. But there's some strong moves available for black here. The exchange up now. Queen d7, protecting f5 as well. Queen e5. King g6 now. So the queen might be coming here next. g3. King f7. King f1. Queen e6, offering an exchange with queens as well. It's kind of skewer on e1. The queen steps back, protecting e1. But now this is a horrendous pin, and in fact, after king g6, white is going to be running out of moves soon. He plays a3, and now after c5, white actually resigns. His king can't move away without losing the knight, clearly. If white tries something like a4, and queen e4 is pretty strong here, actually, with all sorts of ideas. So yeah, this is a really strong idea. But yeah, white resigned here, around about here, after king g6. I think white resigned. So that game was in the first round and set David Howell off comfortably for this tournament. So yeah, that was an interesting game. It looked as though there were some early contortions if we look at the opening again, but it shows, you know, sometimes maybe the lesson here is you have to play what's necessary, even if it doesn't look particularly good. It was necessary moves, you know, to unpin, and necessary moves, you know, later to just deal with the rook here, moving that for a moment. And then, yes, this was good. So even though black was playing a piece down, there was sufficient counterplay, it seems, against white. This knight coming to f4 is always pretty handy. But this position, this pressure on e5 was actually worth something in conjunction with the e2 square if the knight had moved. So yeah, it seems a rough game in some respects. I don't know what you guys think of this game. A rough looking game, but black won it. Yeah, that was in round one. Okay, let's have a look at another game. So the stakes go much higher after. He's playing much higher rated opponents from here on in. So in round two, David Howell was playing white, as in the Swiss one you usually change colours. He was playing against Zayantan does 2-4-3-4, so going up in rating. d4. We have d5, and now c4. We have a Slav c6. Knight f3, knight f6. Knight c3, and black took here on c4. Now white wants to discourage b5. He plays a4, trying to collect this pawn. This is well known. Bishop f5, knight e5, trying to collect a pawn like this. Knight bd7, knight takes c4. I've had this position with white against IM once. It was a bit unpleasant actually. Simon Ansel was an expert in the Slav defense. This is a very good plan, I think, for white now. What's coming up after knight b6, knight e5, a5. This bishop, although it's going to be comfortable on this diagonal, you can blunt it a bit with this move f3, just to play for e4. Try and blunt this bishop. I mean, that's quite a good plan. That's probably the top move in live book here, to play f3. It is, in fact. Yep. So now white took on d7 there, and then played e4. So I think it's fairly comfortable for white, a small advantage. The bishop going back to g6, bishop e3. e5. Now, it's tempting white to play a move like d5, but I think that will be giving black on a plate the dark squares. These dark squares are already weakened. I don't think this is any good. In particular, you know, black might even immediately play bishop c5 with a nice position. White's dark squares are particularly vulnerable here, so white's got to be careful. What he does to e5 is actually, you might not think of this as such a natural move, but white actually plays d takes e5 here. Okay, black didn't want to exchange off queens here with knight or risk the possibility of a queen swap. That might not be the best anyway. Queen takes queen there, but black actually played more interestingly. Temporary pawn sack, bishop c5, and they took that. Knight takes, and now actually a queen swap here. Funny enough, king takes, h4, fresh thing immediately to win this bishop. So black attends to that. Okay, white is faced with the prospect here of black getting e5, and the knight does seem quite comfortable on c5. So it calls for something active to do here. This game, for those just joining here, it's David Howell in the Dubai Open, round 2. His opponent was a 2-4-3-4. David Howell is 2-6-8-6. So he's approaching the 2700 club, very talented British player. So Sean Tan does 2-4-3-4 is playing black, but white comes up with something actually really strong. The engine loves this move that white plays here, and I'm not sure any of you will guess it. So white to play, and I'll give you 20 seconds. What would you play in this position? Incredible, actually. It's really quite light. What would you play with white here? Anyone? So white's temporarily a pawn up. Right, I'm going to show you. Okay, it's not the most spectacular looking, but it's interesting. It's unusual. Instead of white trying to use the d file or anything like that, white actually plays rook h3 to get the rook out like this. Jack g7 might be a target here. Rook e8, rook g3, and you might wonder, well, why can't black take on e5 here? Black didn't. Black played king e7. If he takes on e5 now, what's the penalty? We can play f4. If here, we can castle check. If here, f5, and we're going to win g7. Wow. We're going to win g7 with an advantage. So yeah, this is quite good. Not use the d file or anything, just rook h3 to g3. Because we've got a guaranteed tempo if black's going to win, you know, the rook. With the rook, that pawn, so we get f5 and we get g7. Okay, nifty stuff. So rook e8, rook g3, black played king e7, so white's onto something. White's got an advantage here. This is not just an easy pawn to get now. Bishop c4, which covers that b3 square from that knight. Rook ad8, and white now challenges the d file. Black indulges in a tactic here. Okay, hang on. There was a question. What happens if knight takes e4 after f4? Alright, let's rewind there for a moment. So you're saying after rook takes e5, f4, you're saying knight takes... okay. Apparently, okay, this might not be good because of knight takes g3, right? What we do is throw in a check, rook d3 check, then we take the rook. So we're taking the rook next. So that's winning material there. Okay, but good question. All right. So yeah, I think it doesn't invalidate the rook h3 maneuver. So we get this position with black now playing a strange tactic. He's probably like worse here now. But black plays knight takes a4, getting this pawn to play for b5. But still, white's not too bothered about this. It's white's move here, as Bronstein is often saying. The person with the move has got an advantage sometimes. They can be resourceful. Bishop b3, just drop the bishop back. B takes. Bishop takes a4. These pawns are splintered. But okay, this pawn is not great. But white's still in the driving seat here. Rook b8. King c2 protecting the pawn. Rook b4. The bishop just drops back to b3 here. a4. Bishop just drops back. Rook b5 trying to get the pawn back. White protects it with rook g5. Okay, solid pawn up, check. King d2, king f8. And now another nifty move in this position. e6, hitting this rook. This rook maneuver, this has been the star rook maneuver of the game, this rook h3 business. So still, white's in the driving seat. This ending looks fantastic. Rook takes g5, h takes. I know we've got double pawns here now, as well as here for the moment, but these are dissolving. F takes, bishop takes, clear pawn up. And also, look, skewering line, bishop d7 maybe, or king coming up. So king e7, bishop c4, king d6, g3. That fixes that one. King c5, king c3, and here black is not doing too well. He actually resigned in this position. Let's have a look. Why didn't he play on? If the king moves back, I think we just play king d4. It looks like these pawns are all just going to advance soon with no hassle. So black didn't feel the need to play on here. If bishop h7, trying to keep an eye on e4. Actually, we've got bishop f7. We're going to play g6. This bishop's like stranded. This is just hopeless, of course. We're just going to play e5 and stuff. Okay, so this is a hopeless position after king c3. And black resigned. So what is interesting for me is I've had some experience, painful experience, with white in this variation of the Slav, but it's interesting how white played it. So constructing this pawn chain designed against this bishop on this diagonal, because that can be a really annoying bishop, especially if it's tucked away. And this, how to handle e5. This is a very specific bit of knowledge here. How do we handle this e5, breaking up our dark squares? We don't really want to give black the c5 square on a plate. So white's best, and this is what the engine thinks as well, is to actually take on e5 here. Not to play d5, for sure. Black would just equalize too easily. So d takes e5. Now on the event, so black played bishop c5. On knight takes e5, white can still look forward to this bishop being a bit of a prisoner. I think white might still be okay here, a small advantage. This position, say we have this position, white's okay, different game. Black wouldn't have got into all sorts of trouble, but maybe, black tried to be a little bit clever with the temporary pawn sack, playing against, players over 200 FIDE points high, tried to be a little bit clever with the temporary pawn sack. It's not obvious how, it was going to be punished, but the h4 is with tempo to get the rook h3 resource in. It's clever, and I've seen myself, obviously I've seen thousands of games, but I don't remember this particular recipe against the Slav. I don't know how many of you remember this procedure, but it seems pretty nifty what happened in this game with this rook h3 to g3. What do you think? It's quite neat, is it? As a procedure to remember if you play against the Slav. I think that is quite neat for me. So he actually held on to the extra pawn right into the endgame. This is a desperate tactic. Knight takes a4. But what else is black doing here? Say he did try and get this e5. I don't think there's ever a chance to get the e5 pawn. There's rook g5 here, for example, in this variation. Rook g5. We can even play f4 now. So yeah, I think it was a real extra pawn. the way that happened. Just straight into the end game in the variation of the game. Let's go back to the variation of the game. With a big endgame advantage here, and again the rook on the 5th is very, very handy. So I thought that was quite neat. Alright, let's go on to now the competition gets much tougher. It's a Swiss tournament, remember, it's going to get much, much tougher now. There are loads of GMs playing in this tournament. So this is now round 3. He's playing a very famous grandmaster, Jan Elvist, in round 3. He's playing with the black pieces. So Jan Elvist, Jan-Elvist. So 2547. I'm pretty sure he's a grandmaster, a well-known grandmaster. David against David Howell with black. So d4, and we have this King's Indian style, bishop g5, bishop g7, e3. Black castled, bishop e2. Pretty solid stuff from white. How do we handle this? c5, c3, d6, knight bd2. Black isn't going completely crazy just yet, and it might be tempting, you might think, just to fianchetto the bishop. Actually, interestingly, I mean, this does incur light square weaknesses though to play b6. There is a downside to playing b6. We see instead bishop e6. Looks a bit unusual. Bishop e6, not touching the b pawn. After castles, queen b6. So 1 point immediately. This is a little bit more annoying actually. Knight c5, we can just consider snapping off, or maybe just move the queen back. But anyway, queen b1 was played. Knight c6, rook e1. So black's position for the moment looks quite nice. He actually took on d4, e takes d4, and bishop f5 on the queen, hitting the queen. White's now played knight c4, and we have an exchange of queens. Bishop takes, knight takes, a takes, rook e takes b1. So yeah, white's just played very solidly. How can black try and win this? h6. White actually maybe should have considered moving the bishop back, but actually he took on f6, giving up that dark square bishop. Will he be punished for this? And his idea, d5. Knight goes back, but is the knight heading now, you know, for a nice dark square like c5? Rook d1, knight d7, a3, rook fc8. I think black's position looks quite comfortable, even though he's got the double pawns. There's active pieces. Rook d2, knight c5, threatening knight b3 immediately to fault the rooks. Okay, the knight goes into b3 anyway here. A bit of repetition there. h5. Can he outplay his opponent from here? g3. We have again some repetition. King g7. h3. I think this is a way of getting to the time control a little bit more. Knight c5. The rook actually goes to e3 here, but now knight a4. This is annoying all of a sudden. How do we deal with this? Rook d2. Rook c5 is played. Bit of pressure on white. Rook e4. b5, protecting the knight a bit more. Frees up the rook. Rook b4. Now here is where things get interesting after this rook b4. Maybe this was a slight mistake. Rook b4. Okay, interestingly, black has an interesting resource. What does black play here? Can you guess? Black to play. If I give you 20 seconds. So David Howell's got this nice position, kind of, except for the double pawns. His b5 is obviously under scrutiny here. So it was very tempting for white to play rook b4. But black plays what? Knight takes c3. Yes, he wants to get 2 pawns and a rook for the 2 minor pieces. So is that good enough here? It is pretty good in this position. Check. You'd think, surely. Rook a2. The rooks are pretty aggressive here. Rook e3. Both rooks on the 7th. King coming to defend d2 for a moment. King f8, tending to e7. Knight e1. Rook moves. Knight d3. Now the rook moves here. With maybe rook d2 coming up. That would be annoying. f4. Rook c2 actually now. If we can go over here, that would be interesting. Threatening rook takes b4. There's a pin there. f5. That's taken. Bishop takes. Rook c4. So black is now threatening. Rook takes here. Bishop d1. Keeping the pin. Bishop f3. Yeah, what does white do here about this pin? Maybe best was king f2 to delay things, but you know, rook d4 is pretty miserable. Is winning a centre pawn in any case. So the way white played it was actually bishop f3, allowing this rook takes b4. So we got this fast running potential b pawn now. Rook d4. Knight moves. Check. Yeah, and now black just moved the b pawn. And it's a very strong position where white threw in the towel here. White resigned in this position. Let's have a look. If he played something like king e1, maybe just taking here is fine. Then taking here. This rook's overwhelming with this outside pass pawn. It's very easy for the rook to overcome the bishop and knight in the long run. So yeah, a very difficult position there. So yeah, it was white seemed to play, was content to play very solidly here. If we look at this game, the interesting thing, if we're going to take away anything from this sort of game, is I would routinely consider, for some reason, I don't know if it's some sort of bug, if I was a computer program, I don't know about you guys, but I quite often routinely play b6, and I don't think that's so good. I think this was quite interesting, bishop e6. Because also we can use the b6 square as well. If we play b6, we can't use the b6 square. So anyway, he got an exchange of queens, which and this double pawns. So I know they look ugly a bit, but maybe white shouldn't have given up the dark squared bishop. But yeah, black seemed to have an okay position. And how did he get the advantage? It was when this vulnerability was used as an incentive to attack, with rook b4, that we have this knight takes c3. Yeah, I think that was the turning point here. Technically, black was in the driving seat from this point on, after knight takes c3. So I hope you got something from that one. Okay, let's have a look now at things get even tougher now. In round 4, David Howell was playing against Sergei Volkov at 2-6-1-4. It was with the white pieces. So David Howell 2-6-A6 playing against Volkov. So we have d4, d5, and another Slav. Knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, a6. Now this game really excited me a bit. I had to play it a few times. Couldn't believe it. If it's the one I think it is the one. It's just strange. I don't think anyone's seen. You wouldn't have seen a game like this. So e3, b5, modest, holding that c4, and now b3. This is very popular, to hold the c4 pawn without any issue. Bishop g4, bishop d2 now. This is one of the more interesting moves. Bishop d2, usually bishop e2, apparently about 1,000 games nearly, or h3. But bishop d2 was played here. An interesting waiting move. It means that the queen is ready to recapture still instead of being the bishop on e2. So white now plays h3 with the queen ready to recapture. So this quiet waiting move has given this possibility. And black maybe tries to punish this whole mechanism. Black did take on f3. Perhaps yeah, he wanted to he wanted to go for this. So b4, and it looks as though is the queen like a target a bit. You know, e5 now. Quick e5. Doesn't this equalize for black? This quick e5. You might think it does, but white plays c takes d5 after c takes. Things get very strange indeed here. Very strange. White in this position plays d takes e5. And it's looking like black doesn't want to routinely recapture here. This might be okay. This queen d1 even might be okay. I think d4 we could take that, and this is okay for white. So what black did actually was trying to be more clever. Knight e4 to try and leave the king in the center. So knight takes d2 coming up. And this is just crazy stuff now. So white is not developed. He's got a knight on the rim. You'd think, is there some priority for castling in these games or anything like that? Again, we have this idea, maybe from the earlier rounds, you know, where the e5 pawn was held onto, of the cheeky idea, why not hold on to e5 here? Queen f4 was played. But surely white hasn't got any development here. Why can't black like take on d2, you might ask? Black played bishop e7. If he took on d2, maybe just king takes and prove that white's king is unsafe here. How is it easy to prove? It's not, actually. This pawn seems to be, you know, blocking in the attacking diagonals. This seems to be quite, you know, good for white, this position. So black actually played bishop e7. And surely the queen's going to get harassed here, right? But bishop d3, bishop g5, and white to play here. And this is funny. If you've seen Nimzovic's immortal overprotection game, you might have a clue. What does white play in this position? What does he do? It's funny. It's just a funny looking move. It's a funny game. Actually, there's not too many legal choices, to be honest. So this is probably the easiest question I've ever asked. Coming to think about it, there aren't too many choices for white for the queen here. But one of the few choices is actually not too terrible. So I hope you can guess. No, yeah, it's not queen f5. I think this is ruled out. g6. Queen going back. Knight takes e5. We've got the fork. It's not particularly nice. Yeah. Takes d4. It's not nice at all, this position. Oh, ouch. So, nope. This starts to look a bit diabolical, as an example. So no, the queen just goes to h2, and what's going on in this game? The queen is on h2 here, protecting that extra pawn. This is cheekier than the other game we saw of holding on to the e5 pawn. What is going on here with David Howell and these extra e5 pawns against the Slav? So queen h2. Fine. Queen e7. Isn't black going to just get this pawn with advantage? But the same sort of story as before. White has very important tempo gainers which change the picture here radically. These tempo gainers. h4 is played. Bishop can't use f6. It's driven to h6 here. And now the pawn is protected. f4. And yes, why not? G6 was played. Bishop takes e4, d takes, and now g4. Unbelievable! What is going on? g5 would lock down any f6 from black in the foreseeable future. g4 is played. White's position seems quite good here. What's happened? Can't White even consider castling queenside maybe? Or queen g2 coming up to hit e4. So f5 was played by black, which probably didn't help him that much, because now there's a slight snag. E takes f6. The slight snag is evident. Queen takes f6, looks at the rook. The rook moves, but white is now threatening the b pawn and g5. 2 threats. Queen moves out of the way of g5. g5 is played anyway. But yeah, white wins this pawn here. Now hold on a sec, you might ask, why can't the queen have protected b4? Let's rewind there. We've got this position. If the queen had tried to protect b4, instead of queen e6, let's put in queen d6. I think there's a slight problem here with black anyway. G5 might still be quite good with h5 in mind. This is good for white. With things like h6 even coming up, because the knight's controlling some key squares here. This isn't too good for the bishop. So yeah, black decided to drop this other pawn. So he's 2 pawns down. a5. And the bishop stopping black castling kingside. Knight b6. And now, yeah, rook c7 immediately threatens now rook e7, as well as rook takes g7. The bishop drops back to protect the e7 square. But now a really crushing forcing move in this position is played. White's play. So what does white do here? Well, actually, there's more than one crushing move, to be fair. There's 2 really quite crushing moves at least. So you'll get 500 points for each of them. White's play in this position. What does white want to do? White's 2 pawns up now. What would you play with white? Okay, yeah, 500 points for f5, yeah. That's a good one. And if you also said queen b2, this is another good one. Queen b2. Queen b2 was actually played. I thought, wow, what a game. This queen has gone from h2 to b2. What is going on in this game? But let's have a quick look at f5 as well. The engine's suggesting f5 is strongest here as well. If takes rook f1, if the queen moves here, oh, rook f6. This is crushing. Is it not? Rook takes, check, mate. Yeah, that's pretty crushing as well. f5, and if g takes, bishop takes, take here, and the queen is on e5, that's the point. So if we take here, we've got check, mate in 3, or mate in 2. So, but yeah, David's move is pretty good as well. You know, f5 is not the only one, which is good. This is pretty crushing as well. So black has to react to this. He plays rook g8, but now look, we're on that e5 square. So just knight takes b6, get the queen away from e5, so we can play this check. Bishop takes a3, queen takes a3, leaves this lurking mate on e7. Black's just lost a piece. He resigned. If he didn't take on a3, what does black do? If he takes here, we just play queen e5 check here. Bishop e7 check is mating. Yeah, crushing game. It was just strange that it seems there's a blind spot in some players with black playing the Slav, that there's no point at all for white to try and hold on to this extra e5 pawn. And I'm a great hater usually of materialism, but what's happening here, the materialism is combined with forcing moves and then later dynamic play. Look, we're getting all of these possibilities with this queen on h2. We're getting loose, you know, this looseness. I don't know, it's just difficult for black to play this position. So he ends up being 2 pawns down here. The engine actually gives queen d6 as one of the top moves, but even so it's nearly like +4 here. Queen e2, and we've got things like queen c4 next hitting these guys. These guys are weak anyway, they're not going anywhere. If black castles, check, takes, it's better for white anyway. But yeah, I thought that was a bit of a strange game. It was it seems the higher rated, you know, sometimes they fall down even worse. The higher rated, the 2614 just got absolutely, it seems, murdered here with this, you know, strange bishop d2 waiting move. The usual move here in Lightbook is bishop e2. The whole idea of getting the queen out like this is a bit unusual. So reacting to e5 like this with taking queen f4. So this is a good position. Black has got these weak pawns here. Yeah, I thought that was a fascinating game. Especially, I thought it was quite neat the way the queen is coming around the diagonals and stuff. So on this key diagonal here, it's these points here really quite useful. Okay, so one more game I'd like to show you is round 8, and in round 8, so David was white against Gadir Gusenov 2606. We have e4, a Sicilian defense was played, Nf3 Nc6, and David's a specialist in the c3 Sicilian. It's, yes, you might think on the dull side to play c3, but at least, you know, you don't have to learn tons and tons of opening theory. d5, e takes, queen takes, d4, pretty standard stuff. Bishop g4, bishop e2, e6. White kicks the bishop now. Took. Queen d7. D takes c5. Yeah, I think this is the main move. Well, no, there's not too many games actually from this position. D takes c5. It leaves white strategically with a 3-2. Okay, so, and the king's got this c2 square. It might be quite nifty to use. Whoops, the c2 square. Black took this. King takes. Bishop takes. But how do we defend this? Well, actually, David just played rook f1. It looks pretty passive, but it's just for the moment as a necessary thing to do, so that the king can go there and we can start using the 3-2 pawn majority. Knight f6, knight d2, black castle queenside, king c2. So yeah, with knight c4 on the cards, it seems as though white does have something in this position, a small edge somehow. Knight d5, knight c4. White has emerged here with quite an interesting position, despite the queens coming off, because I think there's important potential, you know, tempo gainers to get these pawns going. We have bishop e7, a4, which maintains the knight without any b5 actually, h6, a5, bishop g5, And then we have a6, as though, you know, some disruption to this, to these squares, these light squares potentially. b6. White takes on g5 and plays rook fe1. So white has got a small advantage here, wouldn't you say? Do you think white is a little bit better here? And with minimal, like, I would say, losing chances, he's installed this nice pawn on a6. I know he's blocked in his own rook, but he's got a nice control of e5 here as well. And these pawns have, of course, doubled. Do you think white's a little bit better here? Black played knight d7. Okay, now a question, if knight takes b6, I'm not sure that's working. Let's have a quick look. If a7, we've always got king b7 defending that pawn. It's not working, but an interesting idea. b4 instead. So it wants to just kick that knight. Rook h4. Okay, on the knight. King b3. Actually, here though, here, this rook's off. Funny enough, knight takes b6 now in this position is mentioned from an engine perspective. This wasn't played, but maybe this is actually quite good here because of b5. This position is starting to be quite nice for white. Maybe rook a6 as a resource. Let's get on to b6. For example, rook a6. And also we've got mating nets around the king. Yeah, it's very interesting, but no, that wasn't played. So it was actually good here. So this is why it's good to make note of these forcing moves. This kind of thing is weakening against knight takes b6. Yes, it's all a bit of fireworks there. But actually, okay, so yeah, rook h4, it was ignored actually, that possibility. It needs like deep calculation. Instead, king b3 was played. King c7. Rook ad1. Rook hh8. Okay, waiting a bit. Bishop e4. Knight goes to e5. Knight a3. Yeah, it's a bit. It's making progress though. Going back means that the b5 square is useful. Rook d2. Knight b5 check. And now rook a2, just defending calmly this second row. Takes. Rook d8. And again, you know, black is threatening. We've got to sort that out. Rook e2. But yeah, we've got this nice pawn majority and this nice pawn installed. Is this enough? Knight e7. King comes here. Black's waiting around a bit. Black is not able to do too much. Rook e3 introduces the idea of harassing this pawn. Rook d2. Offering, yeah, this move offered this attack here. This is interesting. Now, rook g3. And you might think, what? This is a bit artificial. Why can't it be protected or something? Okay, black actually played g6. Let's have a quick look. If you played f6, then taking h4 is actually quite good. Because once this rook gets over here, this is dangerous stuff. Or, you know, with this knight here controlling that square. This position would be even better than this. Might be rook d3, just trying to get here. So this is quite dangerous for black, this position already. So black played g6, and we still have this mechanism that white wants to try and attack the black king now with rook and knight. He gives up his light square bishop and plays rook takes g5. We have rook takes f2. And now rook g4, he wants to just get over here to mate the king, potentially. Or here. Over here, that will do as well. These are the two routes. We have e5. Either is a strong move here, either rook c4 or rook h4. This pawn is really quite a valuable asset in this simplified position. The king is restricted on b8. We have rook h4. So mating 2 is threatened. You know, the knight would have to come out. It's mating 2. Rook d2 defending. But now rook c4. Going like this. The knight's taken away the d6 square. So we have the awkward knight d8. Yielding that c7 square that's jumped into. So white is now threatening rook takes a7, among other things. But hang on a sec, before you play a move like rook c7, isn't this a loose piece? Black played rook d5. And this is a little bit of genius, I've got to say. White play in this position. White play, fantastic move. What would you play in this position? Aren't your pieces loose here? Have you overextended? Has white overextended? C4 I think would just lose, wouldn't it? We would just take on b5. Well, it wouldn't be that good. It's actually still okay. But yeah, the move is actually king c4. It's a quite killer move. Now, black actually played rook d6. Funny enough, this is crazy. But if he took here, what we do in this position is leave the rook stranded. With this. This rook is stranded. Look at this. And say black tries to counter-attack. Then we can take here, still leaving the rook stranded. And if here? Yeah. Here. We'd have a winning king and pawn ending. We'll just play a7, just queening the pawn. Forget about the rook. Just queening the pawn. Incredible little tactic there. So rook c7, knowing that rook d5, just answer with king c4 calmly. Amazing move, king c4. So anyway, rook d6 was played, trying to lure, you know, for king takes, yeah? You know, if knight takes, king takes. But even this position's okay for white. Even that position's very good for white. Like check. And the king, this is good for white. It's all good for white now, after rook d6. White just plays rook takes a7, actually. We have check, the king comes in. Rook takes c3. So trying to lure the knight away from, you know, that's taken, but this ending is just hopeless for black. The king is just far more aggressive than this one. b5, protecting the pawn. And we're on this pawn. Immediately, black protects that. But now just king e4. Saying to black, I'm going to play knight d5 next. And actually black resigned here. He's not even a pawn down, but he resigned. The engine has it as a pretty big advantage. If knight e6, knight d5, say check, it's falling to bits, this ending. So we get something like this. Yeah, these pawns are going to be decisive anyway. they're going to be too quick. Yeah, black maybe could have played on, but no, he didn't. Probably. In fact, so King E4 seems to be on the score sheet on the recorded game. King D6 might even be technically a lot stronger. Just to come into E7. But apparently King E4 was played and black resigned. The best being given here. Let's just look at this again. Instead of knight E6, knight D5, maybe actually it turns out there's something even stronger than knight D5. H4. So say check. We can get in over here. I think the king is just too active compared to the black king. And now we're going to get past H pawn. If check, yeah, we can push for a past the H pawn here. So yeah, I think because the black king's a prisoner, he just didn't want to play on this position. He just thought it was like lost. It does appear lost after King E4, but yeah. So black threw in the towel there. Oh, sorry. The question is, does knight E4 win on the spot too? Knight E4. Yeah. Yeah. King D6, H4. Knight E4 does seem strong. If F5, knight G5. This position where black's not doing much. G4. We're going to force through past pawn here. So yeah, this doesn't look too good. The knight's pretty restricted. Actually, yeah, the knight's pretty restricted there as well. It's got nothing. In fact, the knight's got absolutely nothing here on G4. If we have this position, this is hopeless. Black has to give up this pawn. It's hopeless. Yeah, black's just not doing anything. Yeah, well done. Knight E4. Yeah, Daniel Alistair. Knight E4 wins on the spot. And in fact, I don't know why the engine is not. Yeah, it's mentioning it now. Knight E4 or King D6 is the strongest. But apparently in the game, King E4 was played, which might not be technically as strong. But you know, yeah, it's all a massive advantage though. It's just difficult for black not to lose this now, because of that king just being locked down. But yeah, I don't know what you thought of these games. I mean, we can have a quick look at this game again. A modest opening, and White's just playing for that pawn majority, and also I guess, you know, light square control is good. If we examine the light square control, sorry, after the queens came off, I think it was quite nice having a knight on C4 here, and just having this pawn on A6. It was just very nice. Sort of positional trump cards kind of installed in the position for future endgame scenarios. I don't know if you would agree with that, but this position, you know, seems to be in the long term quite troublesome. So in fact, tactically, knight takes B6 was even on here. If White was a computer, it could like spot things like that. But yeah, this ending stuff here, round about here, you know, once White's got the option here to take on E5, that's big trouble. If the knight had ever gone over here, yeah, different story. But it was actually quite dangerous for the king with these attacking units. This is really dangerous for the black's king, this position. It got worse. I think there was a critical mistake here. Apparently King C8 technically might have been something. But again, I think White has a small advantage. There's always like numerous threats coming up. And what about this pawn? Okay, so yeah, it was just another interesting game. I thought it's technically great play. Okay, so he got an over 2700 rating performance, so I thought, yeah, it's worth interrupting the Fisher matches just for this Dubai Chess Open. I hope you got something from these games. It will be on YouTube, so comments on or questions on YouTube later. And yeah, thanks very much for coming. See you next week.